Hi, I'm Rosie Bailey, CEO of Nibble, the world's leading AI negotiation platform. In each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to uncover how business can harness AI tools to scale negotiations, boost efficiency, and unlock new revenue opportunities. Today, I'm joined by Adrian Pinder, Director of Digital and Data, and Lauren Feary, Global Chief Procurement Officer, both at DS Smith, the global paper and packaging company. They work with major FMCG household names and industrial groups. Now, let's begin. Welcome to Lauren and welcome to Adrian. Starting with Adrian, I'd love it if you would mind introducing yourself and a little bit of your personal background. You know, what brought you here?
Yeah, sure. So nice to meet you, Rosie, and good hello to everyone listening. So my name is Adrian Pinder. I'm head of digital and data here at DS Smith. Been here for just coming up to 3 years. Before that, I worked in a range of other sort of large manufacturing and engineering companies doing similar roles all around sort of digital transformation and helping companies go on their data journey. But I started life as a scientist, actually, in the Ministry of Defence and worked in government for a few years doing science and technology before jumping into industry.
Amazing. I've seen a ton of change, right? Like being head of digital and data would have meant something completely different 10 years ago.
Very much. Yeah, very much so. And it changes all the time. And that's why it's a great space to be in, because the role is constantly changing and what you're trying to do for the companies is constantly changing.
I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit. But before we do so, thank you very much for joining me, Lauren. Welcome to AI Negotiation Unlocked. You're Group Procurement Director at DS Smith currently, but I know you have a background with Diageo and BP and a number of places on the FMCG scale. So give us a little bit about your journey that brought you here.
Sure. Look, I've been in the business 15 months. We are the largest sustainable packaging company in the world, now part of the International Paper Group, which is very exciting. Lots of opportunities for us and our people to embrace that change. So my background was, I've actually done 11 years in telecommunications and IT in a very large telco in Australia, 5 years in banking and finance, all in very large procurement roles. I joined BP in Australia and led a transformation that led me to London with my family. My 13-year-old, who was 4 at the time, also loves to negotiate with me every day, and my husband, and joined DS Smith after I was in fairly large strategic roles across Diageo, supply chain and procurement. So delighted to be here. Adrian and I have been partnering very closely together on our AI journey and done lots of interesting projects, but fantastic to be talking to you about those today.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to diving into transformation, digital innovation and all those topics. But before we do that, we like to keep it real, and negotiation happens as much in real life as it does in the digital sphere. And I didn't know whether either of you had an anecdote of a real life negotiation that you were willing to share.
It's less sort of specific anecdote, but it's more, I think, if you really want to know how to negotiate and get the best out of negotiations, just look at what your kids do. Right, so I've got 2 children, or both are sort of less children now, 17 and 19, but they're always, when they were younger, fantastic at negotiating, right? They learn who to negotiate with, right? So they'll negotiate different.
Yes. Play you off against each other, right?
All players off against each other. They know that. They know when's a good time to ask and when's a bad time to ask, so they get the timing right. And then I think they also know what to ask for, right? Ask for the moon and be comfortable with the stars and know when they've lost and when to walk away. So I think if you want to know how to negotiate, look at your kids.
I think that's really interesting. I wonder why, right? Because there's lots of academic research on how to be good at negotiating, and there's preparation in there, right?
Yep.
There's good preparation.
Yep. Exactly. It's evolution, right? There's probably something in the DNA about this is, hundreds of thousands of years ago, this is how people survived, learn how to negotiate with your parents. So then you got food. And if you didn't negotiate well, you wouldn't get food and that gene would die out. So probably in the genes somewhere.
I think it's really interesting then, because I think it means that 2 things. One is your kids are often very comfortable with the conflict, right? They're not afraid of the conflict.
Yeah.
Because they know that at the end of the day, the relationship is secure. And actually, I think in business, our relationships are often more secure than we fear. So let's start a little bit on a more general conversation about digital transformation. I think one of the things I'm really interested about is that I sit in an AI company. We talk about innovation all the time. We get very excited, shiny new things. But I think both of you in your roles need to both be excited about the new things, but also be patient, right? Because you in an organization the size of DS Smith, you need to have a multi-year plan. I think that's what I'm really interested in is how do you drive change for the long term, stay flexible to those new ideas, but not let them derail you.
Yeah, so shall I sort of start and talk a little bit about what we're doing at DS Smith and how we're thinking about it. I mean, you're absolutely right, Rosie. You sort of have to end up balancing two things. The business has to run, and the business has to continue to run and serve customers and continue to be profitable and to drive through the strategy that it's set. But at the same time, technology always changes, and you have to be at the right point, at the right edge of that technology curve, because if you don't change and if you don't evolve, then ultimately, you go the way of Blockbuster and all of those other companies. And it's getting that balance right? If you go too slow, then you don't evolve. If you go too quickly, then it's change that the business just isn't ready for. And so for me, it starts with a couple of things. It starts with understanding really deeply what the business strategy is, because the people in the business know their business the best, right? They're the people closest to customers, closest to the market. So you have to know what the business strategy is and where the business wants to go. And then you have to find the right use cases. And particularly with AI, we're never going to be short of use cases. There's always going to be 1,001 shiny things that we can do. And, people like me and the tech team want to go off and try and do them all. But A, you can't, and B, you shouldn't. And it's knowing which are the right ones to go after and how to start small, think big, and go on that journey together with the business.
And that's really interesting. So could you give us an example of something that you chased after because you knew perhaps it is aligned with the strategy? Give us an example about how you did that in practice. It's a great framework.
Yeah. So we've got a few, right? I'll start thinking about what we've done on AI. So we knew a year and a half, 2 years ago that we wanted to do something about AI, right? The technology was now sort of market ready, much more sort of user friendly. Companies could do things to a degree off the shelf. A, we wanted to get going, and B, we wanted to do something that could show what's possible and show people really the power of AI. So we developed sort of two sort of fairly simple but really impactful tools. So we've developed a translation engine that will translate PDFs, Word documents, Excels, PowerPoints between any one of sort of 30 languages. And that's really important for us because we're a company, we're in, 35 different countries. Our staff all speak different languages. Our customers speak different languages. So anything that can help us sort of get across those cultural barriers is important. So we developed an AI tool that does translations that we've rolled out across the company that's been hugely successful. And then we've also developed a sort of an internal chatbot that's safe, secure. It's on our AWS environment, and all of our staff can use it a bit like people would use sort of ChatGPT in their personal life. They can use it, and we know it's saving people sort of 30 to 60 minutes a day when they use it. Surveys that we've done.
So then you can measure it, and I suppose you can see who's using it and who's not, because if you've got a big workforce, part of it is just bringing people with you and just allowing them to experiment and hoping that they're embracing of the change rather than concerned about it.
Exactly. And we didn't do this in isolation. We did it, with HR partners. We did it with sort of legal partners. We worked with the works councils that we have. We put in place an AI sort of strategy and governance framework at the start. and make clear that this is always about augmenting what people do. It's always about supporting people. We're not looking to replace people. We're looking to kind of help people and augment what our people do day to day. Basically make life easier for them, which is what these tools do.
So that feels like something that didn't have a huge barrier to change, something that was in your control to change, and something that was a showcase saying, look, we can do these things. Are they going to be things that are bigger, more impactful, take longer? What do you think is going to drive the greatest impact, if you like, on your business?
So I think, look, we're going to have a range of areas. I think the analogy I use is AI is like electricity was in the sort of first industrial revolution, when people went from sort of steam power and water power to electricity. And if you scroll forward, I don't know, 10 years, you will find AI absolutely everywhere across a company.
Yeah, just a sort of layer, right?
Just like a layer, just like you find electricity across a company. And electricity comes into a company in different ways, right? Some points it comes in batteries, in your laptops, your phones. Some point it's hardwired into the sort of plug points, and it'll be the same with AI. So, if I just think of a couple of areas for us, one will be design. So the design area is obviously the front part of our business. It's where customers interact with us, and we have a team, hundreds of sort of great, really creative designers who are working closely with customers to come up with sort of new designs for packaging solutions. I think there's huge potential for AI to work there, supporting designers and supporting customers to do things like, how can we optimize the box, right? So how can we optimize design so that we use the least amount of fiber, right? That's better for the customers, it's better for the environment, it's more sort of sustainable. And we can use AI in that design process, both to optimize, but also come up with new creative designs that, maybe a human brain can't come up with, right?
It's so interesting, isn't it? It's such a different world now. Like, I think previously we would have put a mathematician on that and thought that there was an answer. Whereas now actually we can just, this is not technical, throw the data in a pot. And who would have thought we would be outsourcing the creative parts of our jobs to AI? I mean,
I don't think we'll ever kind of outsource it totally. I think there'll always be a person in the loop. It's back to this point of the AI will always be augmenting what people do, right? And this is, if you look at the creative industries, this is the huge debate in the creative industries, right? Will AI come up with the next sort of Beethoven symphony? I don't think it will, and I think we're a long way away from that. But what it will do will be really to kind of supercharge designers, supercharge human designers, because they can now do a lot more with the kind of 8 hours in a day because they've got these fantastic tools. So I think, certainly for the foreseeable future in our world, the AI will be allowing designers to do more, right? And to look at a sort of larger sort of suite of ideas that they can take forward with. The other area is in the machines, right? And we're already doing projects around digital twins, where we're taking the data from the machine and how the machine operates and building a sort of a virtual model, a digital twin of that machine, and using AI to predict how the machine will operate. All right. So we can predict, the settings and the configurations and the ratios of ingredients that we put in the machine to sort of optimize the output. Again, to help the operators and augment the work of the operators so they've got the best information and the best suggestions for how to operate that machine. And I think just those two things on its own will be sort of transformational for us as a company.
I think that's really interesting, and it harks back to what you were saying about being strategic, right? So on the first instance, you've got an employee chatbot that they can query and use day to day so that they can start imagining what the art of the possible is. But on the other hand, your long-term vision is very, very aligned with what's strategically really important for DS Smith. And at that stage, I'd love to bring Lauren in, because I think that's a really good segue into, I know, honestly, like every procurement team is being asked to do more with less today. And I'm sure you've arrived at DS Smith with a vision for where you want to take that procurement function, and how does digital transformation or AI fit into that? It'd be lovely to hear a little bit about your anticipated journey. And I know you're only 18 months in, so I'm sure you've got lots more to develop.
Yeah, fabulous. I think, and I've had the benefit of coming from sectors and industries that have been able to invest substantially into technology platforms and best of breed applications across procurement and supply chain. I think that for me, the fantastic platforms that Adrian and team have been part of building, he mentioned the equivalent of our chatbot. We've also got a knowledge platform that we've been using as well successfully around, trawling through contract clauses to get insights. And there's a third one, and Adrian will have to correct me on the correct language, but essentially it's a form of character recognition that we've been using to look at scanning sort of invoices as a potential alternative to traditional invoice scanning, OCR type technology. So I think for me, the vision and the space for procurement to occupy is really about offering a competitive advantage supply base to support our packaging and paper and recycling businesses. And we do that through a competitive advantage for cost, a competitive advantage for meeting our ESG requirements, and of course, innovation. And I think that the AI platforms that the business has delivered through Adrian and all the team in IT are a fantastic way to look at leveraging that in a couple of ways. One, to your point, traditionally negotiating contracts and running tenders is really labor intensive. And if you don't have some of those, technology best of breed applications in, it can be even more labor intensive for many organizations, small businesses, even large businesses like ours. Whereas I think this is the way to accelerate it. And I don't have to spend any money on this stuff. Adrian's already got these platforms we can leverage, and I don't have to spend millions of pounds to use them. So we've already been using some of these platforms, as I mentioned. If we look at knowledge, traditionally, when a new law comes out in Europe, and they come out all the time, you might have to trawl through thousands of contracts to see whether you're compliant with the new legislation. You might have to throw a couple of £100,000 or £1 million at legal resources to go and vary contracts. Now, at a click of a button, we can actually scroll contracts and see where don't we have certain clauses. It could be relating to new legislation around EUDR or deforestation regulation. It could be around, different packaging requirements legislation. So it saved a lot of time and money in actually trawling those sorts of contract clause compliance. And I would say that's a need for every business. It's quite a complex landscape.
And I suppose from that point of view, you're reliant on having your data, in a sense, in a place where you can do that searching, as well as the capabilities to do that searching.
Yes. In some ways, we've been able to load that. We had also a recent situation where we've been, go through an acquisition process, and when you're acquired, you need to answer things like change of control clauses. So that's been a big game changer in just saving lots of time. There's been some learnings. I think we found that some of those documents weren't quite in the right format to enable the scanning, but with the great work of Adrian and team, they've helped us find some fixes through those learnings. I think the other area is comparing tender outcomes. Early in my career, I used to be a bid manager. We have tender files this thick when you're submitting for sales bids to win business. And when you're on the other side having to read it, it takes hours. And, Adrian's been on committees where you've, assessed tenders and supplier responses. Now we can quickly do side-by-side comparisons. AI can even recommend a person to award the business to. But again, we have a human eye set over that. We don't just adopt the recommendation without looking at the logic of that. But it's been a huge game changer in time in comparing side-by-side tender responses, helping to form logical recommendations for those that should win the business. On the contracting side, I mentioned contract clause trawling. I think the other area of opportunity for us is we've been doing some pilots around invoice scanning. And I think, Adrian, some of the results have shown that in our accounts payable area, not only is it sometimes more accurate than OCR technology, but it's also a lot cheaper. So I think there's huge opportunity to explore that in some of our sort of accounts payable and processing areas. I think it's optical character recognition, but Adrian can go into that example specifically a little bit more in detail for us.
Yeah, that was exactly right, Lauren. So OCR, optical character recognition. So we still get a lot of invoices in the post, right? Comes in a paper format, one form or another, and we have to get them into a digital format. And there's been technology for, 20, 30 years, OCR, you kind of scan the document and then a solution kind of reads it and takes that information or hacks it out basically and sort of digitizes it. What we're now doing with a technology called IDP, Intelligent Document Processing, is we're not just recognizing the characters, but we can now say, okay, this is an invoice, take off the customer name, like take off what the product we're buying is, take off the customer reference number, and we don't have to tell it the customer address is always top right, the invoice code is always bottom left. The AI knows that. It's been trained because we're using a large language model. So we can basically now go from a sort of a paper invoice and, within milliseconds, get that data that we can then feed into, an SAP or a finance system automatically.
Do you know, I think this is the edge of something that's completely changing. So I think, Lauren, if you joined DS Smith, and here I'm going to pontificate, like if you joined DS Smith 10 years ago, I think the first thing you would have done is tried to get everything really structured. And say you can only use these certain suppliers, the data's going to be here, everything's going to come through me, it needs to be really structured. It feels to me like we're on the edge of something where that need to hyperstructure things, but to me it's like it's a 10-year shift, right? Like it was before about getting the data into the right format, making everything homogeneous, whereas now we can read non-homogeneous invoices. You can start to be much more flexible. So if somebody in the business says, I want to use a new supplier, perhaps it's quicker and easier to take that on board and to make sure you're comfortable that it's not too expensive or non-compliant. Do you see a mindset shift?
I mean, absolutely. If we use that example with contracts, we didn't have to load them all into a really comprehensive, contracts lifecycle management system. We were simply able to load them into the knowledge library. And that was very, very easy. So I think that's a big game changer. And I think that's in a space when in manufacturing in Europe and UK, it's quite challenging times for lots of sectors and money is tight, investment is tight, and every piece of investment is really going into capacity and supporting our customers and products. So I think these sorts of applications and platforms that we've got in DS Smith are really a game changer, but they could be a game changer for lots of industrial goods and services and manufacturing players and other sectors.
I like your point that it's not just the big guys that can do this now. We've got a corporate vision that you should be able to drag and drop a document into a reader and it should be able to say, I think you might want to negotiate the price and the payment terms are not in line with things. Would you like to send this negotiation link to this email, which is linked on the document? And then you've just got everything there, right? And you can say, yes, I would like to negotiate. Thank you very much. Which brings me on to AI negotiation. So I'd love to know what you think of it. Perhaps Lauren first, but Adrian, I'd love your views. Have you heard of it? Have you thought about it? Where do you think it might be useful? Where do you not think it might be useful?
I think it's super exciting. Where we've started our journey is we've got mixed adoption across the procurement community. We've started a procurement community to help share those use cases and examples. As I mentioned, we've been more using it in doing, tender comparisons to save time in tender evaluation and award. Been using it in terms of also contract comparisons. So looking at when a supplier comes back with their contract position and it differs from our own, we can do a quick comparison and that saves time. In contract negotiation, it saves legal time, it saves us time. So it's all been about saving time. I think our journey, and we're keen to learn from others, is really around how do we move more progressively into advanced negotiation capability. We'd probably look to start in the smaller scale areas of our business. We have, like most companies, what we call tail spend, which might be under, 100 grand, under 50 grand. Our top 500 supplier spend is with 80% of our spend. Those are big strategic relationships, and obviously there is an element of relationship management that's really important in some of our top machinery players in particular. But where I'd like to see the use of AI go for us is in sort of predictive analytics, but also those negotiation outcomes that might then remove the human effort, so our people in procurement can focus more on those big strategic partnerships, finding innovation opportunities and less in that sort of tail, smaller scale spend, which can be very labour intensive.
Yes, and everyone has, it's the 80-20 rule, don't they say? It's lots and lots and lots of suppliers as well. And Adrian, from your point of view, do you see broader applications?
I do. I mean, I guess it's sort of linked to the whole AI sort of agent movement that they have now, that AI is going to sort of transform into all of these little agent blocks, and you'll have an agent that goes off and, does your shopping for you, and an agent that will do your sort of negotiations for you. And as Lauren says, you can see it coming in for the tail, where you have those sort of long chain of sort of lower value, potentially sort of lower risk or lower complexity negotiations that previously, I don't know, I remember 20 years ago as a civil servant in the Ministry of Defence, we were building a sort of supplier portal where suppliers could come in onto a sort of central portal and bid for projects. It sort of feels like that would be the next sort of logical extension, that the portal not only just does the marketplace, but gets into the sort of negotiating as well, particularly for the sort of lower complexity aspects.
Fascinating. And where do you think it will not be appropriate? What do you think the risks are? Maybe Lauren.
Sure. As I said, I think there is a need, sort of certainly in our sector and business, for that sort of human relationship intervention, the interpersonal influencing aspects. I think if we look at our packaging and paper footprint, the paper manufacturing space is quite consolidated in terms of the machinery players are known, they're long-term, many European players, equally packaging, but they're quite industry nuanced. Having those relationships and managing those relationships is really important to make sure that we get access to innovation and new technology and enhancements ahead of the competition. And it is a differentiator in many of our mills and also packaging sites. So I think that human element and that relationship piece is actually quite important. Having said that, by using these technologies, it's liberating my team to spend more time on that as opposed to administration and those sorts of tasks. And that's where I'm really excited, because most people like that stuff. They like getting out to supplier sites. They like looking at, value chain opportunities they can't see. I think to your point, Adrian, on agents, I'm still getting to grips with all these different terms, but I think to me there's also huge potential for making everyday decisions easier. So just guiding people to, rather than reading long manuals and instruction guides. Adrian, we were speaking about manufacturing and maintenance. In the past, many maintenance and engineers are retiring. When I was at BP and other sectors, it's the same sort of thing. It's harder to find maintenance engineers. Also, some of these maintenance manuals at the sites are really thick. The fact that we can now, record those, digitize those, and then if someone's at a site and they've got a problem or an issue, they can quickly troubleshoot it through the technology and AI. So I think there's many applications, and that's an application for the business that they can benefit, but also that helps us spend less money potentially with, say, these maintenance suppliers as well. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate on how we look after those sort of efficiencies as well.
For me, it's all about freeing people up, right? It's all about freeing people up to work on the more sort of complex, sort of challenging contracts. It's one thing to be buying, I'll use the ubiquitous example of paper clips, right? It's one thing to be buying sort of paper clips. It's another thing to be buying a very sort of complex, let's say, service contract, right? Where you're buying kind of outcomes or you're buying sort of consultancy. It's very difficult then to sort of define the product and define what you want in the contract and define what does a, sort of acceptable performance level look like. You really need sort of people heavily in the loop when you're doing those sort of very sort of complex performance sort of contracts, from my experience. But there's certainly a role there for AI to do a lot of the sort of heavy lifting, as Lauren said, a lot of sort of more simpler work to free people up to work on the more complex sort of challenges, which today, frankly, is difficult for them to get to because they're having to do a lot of the sort of simpler tasks that could be automated.
And I suppose that starts to go from internal use cases to external and visible use cases.
Exactly. So that's always, we really got to think through that. How do our customers want to interact with us, right? Do our customers want to act via a chatbot, or do they want to interact sort of person to person and human to human? So it gets into quite sort of sensitive sort of areas that, as we were saying previously, we've really got to go with the business, and the business knows its customer best and support them on what they want to do. But there's certainly a lot of opportunities and a lot of places we can help our customers and help the business to works even more strongly with customers.
And finally, just to other leaders navigating digital transformation, and we've talked about nobody's got an infinite budget. So is there one quick fire piece of advice that you've maybe learned over the last year that you want to share? Adrian first and then Lauren.
A very clear sort of thing that I always go with, which is think big but start small. Right. So you have to think big. You have to go after the big, meaty, gnarly, complex problems. Otherwise, it's like not worth doing. But you've got to start small because they're so big and gnarly, and you've just got to get going so people can see progress. So think big, start small.
Love it. And Lauren?
I mean, I completely agree. I think there's people in my jobs in different businesses that think AI is a hype cycle. I don't, because I've seen those practical use cases and practical examples that have given me the reason to believe. And as I speak to people that are more advanced on the journey as well, I'm learning from others, in other CPGs and other industries as well. So I think it's not only about finding those right use cases, but actually sharing them. I mean, Adrian spoke about that translation tool. I think that's probably saved us a couple of £100,000 a year. And we often talk about that. It wasn't difficult to establish. It's very easy for the business to use and learn. And Adrian's also given demonstrations as to how he's prepared presentations from it as well. So I think it's about sharing those examples, bringing them to life, building momentum, and keeping that excitement and energy around AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was really insightful, really practical, and I can't tell you how great it was to have a chance to talk it through with both of you. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Adrian. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Rosie.
Lovely. Thanks, Rosie.
Thanks for listening today to AI Negotiation Unlocked. If you're ready to take the next step in transforming your business operations and scaling your negotiations with AI, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Want to learn more about how Nibble can empower your business? Visit us at nibbletechnology.com or follow us on social media for updates and insights. Stay curious, keep innovating, and we'll see you next time on AI Negotiation Unlocked.